cloud chase. That's the shit they glorify. I don't even try hard. That's gangsta shit immortalized. No records of a trace. When your crime is organized, no man is over me. I'm highest in the morning time. Low key in the birds when I cross the state borderlines. Spin your block and horrified. Fuck your bitch, you mortified. I'm standing where you draw the line, nigga. Hold the line. My nutsack, I'm grabbing mine. Both of mine, quit holding mine. You gon' get this work and some overtime. You know the vibe. Little nigga, you know it's me. I don't need them to notice me. When conflict get crucial, I can't help but do them bogusly. Smoke you like a stogie, beat you like you stole from me. Niggas out of body, put you back where you supposed to be. I shoot at you waking in the moment, niggas toast for you. My niggas do the most for me, that's what they supposed to. I want all the smoke, nigga, cut the shit you think you bad enough and test. And you know how I'm coming, I ain't ducking nothing. You know when I pull up on your block, it's bustin'. You know how I'm coming, you came with me. You know what's going, stop playing with me. I want all the smoke, nigga, cut the shit you think you bad enough and test. And you know how I'm coming, I ain't ducking nothing. You know when I pull up on your block, it's bustin'. You know how I'm coming, you came with me, gang. You know what's going, stop playing with me. Real gangsters move critically. When that shit get critical, no peace amongst enemies, no pity for the pitiful. Real nigga down to the bones and the minerals. Stick to the G code, I never told another soul. True to the literature, now salute the general. Kill you on your birthday, dance out on your funeral. It ain't about the clout chase, I'm a man of principle. Niggas out of body, now they body isn't critical. Cradle to the casket, the life we live is typical. God body, cause I will depart you from your physical. Niggas living fantasies, act like they was the only one. Don't talk to me about these streets, fuck you think you know me from. Just cause you related to them gangsters, that don't make you one. I ain't got no bloodline in these streets, but I could spill me some. I ain't got no mercy for this bitch, and she outside with us. They on demon time, we bring them hell and the fire with us. All this smoke, nigga, cut the shit you think you bad enough to test. And you know how I'm coming, I ain't ducking nothing. You know when I pull up on your block, it's bustin'. You know how I'm coming and who came with me. You know what's going, stop playing with me. I want all the smoke, nigga, cut the shit you think you bad enough to test. And you know how I'm coming, I ain't ducking nothing. You know when I pull up on your block, it's bustin'. You know how I'm coming and who came with me, gang. You know what's going, stop playing with me.
What's good? What's good? Shalom, shalom. What's cracking? What's cracking? Hold on 1 second. Yeah, what's good? What's good? You know, I know y'all see the title. Yes, we back at it again. Black History, BC. Yes, the Maccabean Brothers, the Hasmonean dynasty. We're gonna get into it. Um, so yeah, if you know, you know. Uh, we got a holiday coming up this weekend. Better known as Hanukkah, Feast of Dedication, right? Feast of Lights or whatever you want to call it, right? Coming up this week. I know some of our brothers and sisters probably celebrated it, a little early, you know, maybe a week or two earlier, you know. So shout outs to them and all that. Um, so yeah, we're gonna get into the Maccabee Brothers, right? Like I said, it starts technically at Friday sundown, you know, going into Saturday, and it's we keep it for 8 days, right? Um, so yeah, but of course before we get all the way into it, we want to give all praises to the Most High God Yahweh, and we do so in His only begotten Son Yahweh Shai, who the world mistakenly and know as Jesus Christ. So yeah, we're gonna get into a little history. That's why we call it Black History BC, right? And you know what we like to do around this time. We start Black History a little early, and dealing with our Maccabean brothers, right? So like I said, so we gotta understand we got deep history, within our people, and understanding that this Bible is our history book for the Israelites, right? The Black, Hispanic, Native American people, right? This is our history book. So we got very deep history, right? And a lot of times in February, they, when the month come around, they talk about the same old. But we have a rich bloodline of heroes and people that did things, right? So we're gonna get into it. We're not gonna we're gonna go a little deeper into it, as the holiday get here or whatever, right? But we're just gonna read a little bit, right? Get a little history. Just start with First Maccabees, right? Let's go to First Maccabees. Chapter 1. Right, so now our the Maccabee brothers, the Maccabeans, if you're familiar with the history, this was during the Greek captivity, during that time, Alexander the Great, then, his armies and, Antiochus and all them people, right? So, we end up fighting against these people, right? And, and we eventually got a win on these guys, and that's how we, end up coming up with this holiday that we call Feast of Dedication, or what better known as Hanukkah, right? That those people stole from us. And so yeah, let's get into it though. See what was going on with our brothers and them. So so like I said, it's starting off during the time of Alexander, right? So it says and we all familiar with Alexander the Great. So again, like we said before, this is history books. It's our history book. And Alexander is a man of history. And it happened after Alexander, the son of Philip the Macedonian. This is Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. Who came out of the land of Chittim and smitten Darius of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. So we know the history. Alexander, started off with, the Macedonians basically having a civil war with the Greeks and all that. So he ended up consolidating all the province of Greece. Then he became the ruler of Greece, the first ruler of Greece, right? Then it says, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. So we know the history. You know, he had went around the world 12 years doing his thing, right? Conquer a lot of land, right? Very fast. You know, faster than, you know, any general in history. That's why in the book of Daniel, you know, it says that, you know, it's like a goat whose feet never touch the ground, you know, because he's just running so fast, taking territory and conquering, right? So, and it says, and went through the, and went, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, and much so that the earth was quiet before him. You know, meaning, you know, he just had total dominance. You know, wasn't no nation that can come up against him and, you know, make war with him, right? And it says, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him, right? So, so again, he took over a lot of nations, right? And doing so, he put those nations in servitude, made them pay taxes, and you know, and pay tribute to the people, to the land of Greece, right? Then it says, and it says, and after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. And we know the history. You know, he got sick. You know, some say, you know, disease or whatever, right? Then it says, where he called his servants as much were honorable and had brought up with him from his youth and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So, you know, as he was on his deathbed, you know, kind of decided that, you know, split up the kingdom that he had, right? And it says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare ruled every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them many years, and evil were multiplied in the earth, right? So when these people came into rulership, evils began to multiply on the earth, and their descendants is ruling to this, you know, this day, right? And it says, and after his death, they put, okay, then it's, oh, let's get this real quick. Let's get Proverbs real quick. Get Proverbs, let's get Proverbs 29 and 16. When the wicked are multiplied, transgression increases. And so again, it says, after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them, many years, and evil were multiplied in the earth. So over here in Proverbs, it says, when the wicked are multiplied, transgressions increaseth, but the righteous shall see their fall, right? So again, when these people are in charge, evil multiply upon the earth, right? And that's why the current state of the earth is the way it is now, because the descendants of these people are in charge, right? So yeah, let's get continue. And it says, and there came out of them a wicked root. Again, like I said, like we just read, Antiochus, surnamed Epithius, son of Antiochus the king, who had been hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of Greeks. In those days were out of Israel wicked men, who persuade many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we have departed from them, we have much sorrow. So we had some of our people, Uncle Tom's, right? That was like, all right, they see the Greeks, coming into power, they dominating and stuff like that. They're like, well, shoot, just subjugate ourselves to the Greeks, right? Just, get down with the program, right? And that's what a lot of our people do. A lot of our people, we go with the flow. We see like the people of power, they moving this way, then out of fear or selfishness, we, flow with it. That's why you got a lot of our people, joking and, posting stuff about how ICE is, going up and, messing with our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters, right? Because it tells us right here, in those days when there were wicked men, right? It says, in those days were out of Israel wicked men who persuade many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen. And that's what a lot of our so-called leaders of our community have made a covenant with the heathen, right? And that's why a lot of atrocities and a lot of stuff go down, and they don't really say nothing. Like Al Sharpton, he'll show up if you got a check. If it's a check, some money to be made, he'll show up, right? But people don't. Our leaders is non-existent. And they're puppets. And it says, in those days went out wicked men who persuade many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that round about us, for since we departed from them, we have much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. So for those people that's, let's assimilate, just get down with the program, right? So it says it pleased them well. And it says, then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen, whereupon they built places of exercise at Jerusalem. So they even built coliseums and gymnasiums and stuff, right? How the Greeks used to do it, right? And then when you get into our history, because I looked it up, right? Because I was wondering, because when you look into the history, the Greeks and stuff, they had, their wrestling and stuff like that, and their little Olympic sports stuff and stuff, that they done put on the whole world. But when you look at our people, the Israelites, when you look at the ancient Israelites and what we did for recreation, and that's why I say we are, not we, not I, but the Bible, and I agree with it, and I just added this one thing to it. The Bible says we are a nation of kings and priests, right? And I added a nation of kings and priests and warriors, right? Because when you look at the history, like what we did, we played games, we did puzzles, we did, philosophize, made up riddles, right? Then we also practiced martial arts, right? And even though, like, when we think about martial arts, we always think about the Asians, the Oriental, the people of the Oriental, right? The East. But we also practice martial arts when you get into it. And that was what we did. You know what I'm saying? We were scholars, we were priests, and warriors, right? We just worked on our little. That's why David said that he thanked God. I'm paraphrasing. That the Most High gave him the spirit to learn how to fight. That bless his hands to teach him how to make war, right? So we were warriors, priests, and kings, right? That's what our nation consists of. But then as we start to assimilate with the Greeks, and that's when we start adding into like what we call today sports and stuff like that, then as we read in here, what the Greeks used to do with the little Olympic stuff and all that stuff, for the lack of better terms, just I say Olympic to encompass all the different types of stuff that they did, the activities. So It says, then a certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king who gave them a license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. So, and that's what a lot of our people do. We get permission, we go and get their certificates and all that, so forth, to, their permission to be a part of their little thing, right? Then it says, whereupon they built places of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So, they built these, stadiums and gymnasiums and, this, how we say today, what's the word I'm looking for? Gentrify, you know what I'm saying? So they let the Greeks come in and gentrify Jerusalem, right? And so it says, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to mischief. So, a lot of our people, end up just following the customs of the Greeks. Because, when you get into the history, although we eventually, end up fighting back and, fighting against the Greeks, but at first, when Alexander rolled up in there, our people, we ain't want no smoke. We got down. But then again, we wasn't in a position to really fight because, we were slaves to the Persians at that time. So then, once they took over, it's just like a new master took over, right? So then as they took over, we see, as we're reading here, our people started to, they accepted it. They didn't put up a fight. They're like, all right, okay, let's get down with the program, right? But we had some brothers that was strong and mighty that said, no, what was that 90s protest? Hell no, we won't go. Hell no, we won't go. Right? The Maccabees. So it says, and now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominance, might have the dominion over 2 realms. So he like, all right. So Antiochus, get into history, the part that he ruled was like basically what we call the Middle East, right? So then you had Ptolemy that was in Egypt, and he was ruling North Africa, and so he wanted some of that. He wanted, go get down on his homeboy Ptolemy and try to go to war with him and take Egypt, right? I think eventually he ended up getting it. I'm not sure. I gotta check, but I know, when he first went down there, it didn't work. But I'm not sure. So don't quote me on that part. So it says, and made a war against Ptolemy, the king of Egypt, but Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got the strong city in the land of Egypt and took the spoils thereof. Okay, he did eventually take it though. But when you get into history, like I said, I don't know. I mean, like I said, don't quote me on that part. But right here it says he took it. But again, it's not like word for word, and but what I'm saying is, it's not like, sometimes the Bible doesn't mention every single battle. That's what I'm trying to say. But boom, boom, boom. Right where I'm at. And it says, after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he had returned again in the number, he had returned again in the 143rd year, and went against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and all the vessels thereof. So, they came in, they got down on us, they robbed us, right? Wasn't cool. You know what I'm saying? They took our stuff. You can even look up it's a mural that they, made where, they showing that the Greek soldiers coming into the temple and stealing our menorah, right? And so, and you can see our menorah was so big, it took about like 15, 20 people to carry the thing out. You know what I'm saying? It was like super big, right? You can see it on the picture graph that they created to tell the story. So let's jump to chapter 2 real quick. Cause like I said, we ain't gonna read the whole story. We got time for that. We're just getting the gist of it, right? So then let's jump to chapter 2. It says, in those days rose Mattathias, the son of Jonathan, the son of Simon, a priest of the son of Jehoram from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Armadan. So these the brothers right here, right? The Maccabean brothers, right? So we're getting into it. Like I said, cause we have a deep history. We have warriors. We have a lot of people. A lot of rich history. In our in our bloodline, right? In our culture, in our heritage. And it says, and he had 5 sons: Jonathan called Cadus, Simon called Tassis, Judas who was called Maccabees, Eleazar who was called Alvaran, and Jonathan whose surname was Antipas. Right? So, these 5 mighty brothers that hold it down for the Most High, hold it down for Israel, that saved Israel from the Greeks. Right? Because they had enough. They like, look, we can't get down with this. Right? What did old boy say? I can get jiggy with this. Right? Because they wasn't getting down with the whole Greek thing. Right? They wasn't feeling the whole Uncle Tom, Stephen from Django atmosphere that was going on in Israel, right? They wasn't feeling it, right? And it says, and when he saw the blasphemy that were committed in Judea and Jerusalem, he said, woe was me. So now, these brothers, right, Mattathias, high priest Mattathias is a Levite. So he's looking at what's going on, right? He's like, man, we were like the Lord's people, keeping the laws of God, doing what's right, you know what I'm saying? And look at us now. We following the ways of the Greeks, you know what I'm saying? We worshiping Zeus and Herod and everybody else, you know what I'm saying? We building, gymnasiums and doing all this stuff, just doing the things that they do and not the stuff that we do, right? Just taking on their customs. And if you know what's going on with Israel, God told us to be separate. And whenever the Israelites assimilate themselves into other nations, that's when God punishes, right? So Mattathias being a high priest, he know the law, he know what's going on, so he see the trouble that's coming ahead. So he felt like he needed to do something about it. So he said this, woe is me, wherefore I was born to see misery of my people and of the holy city, and dwell there was delivered unto the hands of the enemy, and the sanctuary unto the hands of the strangers. Right? Like, man, I ain't never thought I'll see this day. Right? Never thought I'll see a day like this where the sanctuary, the temple, is given to these strangers, to the enemy, right? And our people is just cool with it and just going about it like, like business as usual, right? So as a man of God, this is pissing him off. This is making him angry. He can't stand this stuff, right? And I feel Mattathias, right? Mattathias is probably one of my favorite people, right? And his, sons, Jonathan and the rest of them, right? And I feel Mattathias. Then it says, her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried into the captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Because the Greeks were some brutal people when they came in, and they was, unaliving everybody, right? They stole our stuff, right? And it was just unaliving everybody that wasn't, getting down with the program, that wasn't, trying to assimilate to the program of the Greeks, right? So it says, which nation have not had a part in her kingdom and gotten her spoils, right? Hold on, let me read this part. It says her glory. Okay, I read that. It says, what nation have not had a part of her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? And that's what we need to ask, right? Because them people over in the land right now that just unaliving each other and blowing up everything, they ain't supposed to be over there, neither one. So what nation have not? What did Mattathias say? He says, what nation have not had a part in her kingdom? Right? That's why all those other nations is over there in that land right now, right? Because we just easy pickings, right? You know what I'm saying? That's why the Bible calls us a speckled bird. Speckled bird is like a bird that's easy for prey, right? And we just easy picking. All the nations look at us as vicks, right? How we used to say back in the day, this person's a vic, a victim. They look at us as someone that they can just take advantage of, right? Or how they say on the West Coast in Cali, mark. They call people marks and stuff. People out here being marks from Jellystone Park. That's how they look at us, right? So just an easy pickings, easy victims that they can take advantage of and manipulate. And a lot of our people, that's why the Bible describes us as sheep. The Most High called his people sheep, the Israelites, because the characteristics of a sheep, they're very trustworthy. They're very not trustworthy. I mean, what's the word? They're very trusting, right? You can lead them to anywhere, right? How to say, like leading a lamb to the slaughter, right? You can put a sheep on a conveyor belt and have them on a conveyor belt, and it's a whatever mechanism that's there to turn them into lamb chops or whatever it happens. So they can see their fellow sheep right in front of them just get chopped up real quick like a jinsu, turn into a lamb chop. They're not going to move or say anything. They're just going to stay right there and just keep on going. That's how our people is, right? That's why our people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, because we're just like those sheep. Just, whatever's trending, whatever, we just get in line. If you're old enough to remember the Jetsons cartoon, when they go to the airport or something or whatever, instead of just walking, whenever they go to a store or a public place, it's like a little conveyor belt, that they would stand on, and it would, just take them through the airport or the store or wherever they at, right? So that's how we are. We just on a conveyor belt of life and just following society and not doing what God told us to do, right? So it says, what nation have not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she is become a bond slave, right? Because that's what's going on over here during this time. Because like I said, we're getting overtaken by the Greeks, right? And it's like, and what it say? It says all of our ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she is become a bond slave, because like it says in Romans, Jerusalem above all is free, right? That's the Most High God land that he gave to us, right? But again, whenever we start to assimilate and want to be like everyone else, then that's when the Most High put other nations above us and allow them to rule over us and do, and do whatever they want, right? Until we decide to repent and call for, the Most High to save us out of those conditions, right? And it says, and behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it, right? So, the history, the Greeks went in there, they put their little statue of Zeus in there, they started sacrificing pork and all that, unclean meats, all different type of stuff, just defiling the temple, right? And then getting other people to do so as well. And it says, to what end thereof shall we live any longer? So he was very distraught at seeing the destruction and the decline of his people, right? And that's how we need to feel about ourselves, about our people, about our nation. When we look at the negativity that goes on within our community, we need to feel something about that, right? We can't just be like, oh, well, that's just what niggas do. You know what I'm saying? No, we need to correct these things, right? And Mattathias was like to the point where, like I said, it sickens him. It upset him because he remembered the glory of Israel. He know the history, right? He know the scriptures and how Israel, was, doing their thing and how, God was working through him. And now he's looking at his people at a fallen state, assimilating themselves, and he's just like, how they say, how the mighty have fallen, right? And because, if you know the history, what kept us, and what got us, out of, helped us in that Persian captivity was that we, end up, keeping the law, right? So then, again, the story, that they allow us to go back to Jerusalem and all that stuff. So we was cool, we was chilling, right? So here come the Greeks. But anyway, then it says, then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put sackcloth and mourn very sorrow. So, like I said, so Mattathias and the sons, they was all like upset about what was going on with the nation. So they was in mourning, they was upset, right? And it says, in the meanwhile, the king officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Maccabean to make them sacrifice. So now the Greeks, they making the people sacrifice, right? And it says, and when many of Israel came into them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. So they made us all come to this, to the temple because they wanted us to force us to make a sacrifice, right? And here's the thing, right? Because we got to understand this thing with the Most High God, our contract with the Most High God, our covenant with the Most High God, right? And because they understand it, what I'm saying? Like when I say they, I'm talking about current day. I'm talking about the elites, the people that know what's going on. They know what's going on, right? So, and even back then, these people understood it. The other nations understood it. Let's get this really, really quick, right? Let's just pull this out real fast, right? Just to prove how the other nations knew how the Most High God dealt with our people, right? So I'm just going to get straight to the point, right? I'm going to get the backstory, then I'm going to get straight to the point. So now, this is basically a modern day, well, I'll say modern day Japanese soldier, that's in the army, right? And he's given his captain or his general, the history of the Israelite people, and he's trying to, tell them how to defeat them. And at this time, he was trying to tell them, like, hey, you probably should leave them alone because they kind of, doing the things that they need to be doing, right? So anyway, long story short, let's get it. And it says, now, therefore, that's what I mean by how, when I say the other nations, they know how to deal with us, right? They understand the contract that we got with the Most High God. We have to understand that contract that we got with the Most High God, right? Because they damn sure know. That's why they do the things that they do. They make the laws that they do. They propagate the things that they do, right? Because they know. Because even back then, they knew. Because of this. Now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error in his people, and they sin against their God, let us consider this shall be their ruin. Let us go up, and we shall overcome them. So now this is the book of Judah, chapter 5, verse 20, right? So it says, if there be any error in these people, then let us go, then we can attack them, then we'll be able to overcome them, and then, then we can do our thing, right? So they know that. They know if we're not keeping the laws of God, if we're in sin, that's when we're vulnerable because the Most High is not with us. Because we have a unique quality as a nation, right? The Most High God fights for us, right? He fights all of our battles for us, right? But we have to keep the laws and keep our end of the contract so all that can, take a place, right? Because contract, just like how, when you're in a contract with someone, everybody has to do their part for that contract to be valid, right? So when we keep the laws of God, the Most High God fights for us. So he says this, now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error in his people, and they shall sin against their God. So he knew this. They knew this. And they shall sin against their God. Let us consider this shall be their ruin, and let us go up and shall overcome them. Right? So they knew the way to beat the Israelites, the way to beat the Black, Hispanic, and Native American people is to keep us far away from our God by keeping us in sin, by coaching us to do things that is counter to what the Most High God tells us we should do, right? Whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, right? Because they do a lot of sneaky stuff, like telling a friend a few days ago, like how they put pork, in toothpaste, right? Stuff like that, So lotion, or whatever, right? They do things, right? So that's why you gotta do, your research too, to find out what's going on, certain products, right? And it says, but if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord now pass by, right? Meaning don't mess with these people. If they're in their land, they're keeping the laws of God, they got, they're keeping the commandments. Let's not go to war with these people because God fights for them, right? And we can't box with God. We don't want them problems, right? We know what God do. He destroys nations, right? He's a world ender, right? That's what he do. He ends worlds, right? So we don't want this problem with that, man, right? So it says, but if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord now pass by, lest their Lord defends them, and their God be before them, and we become a reproach before all the world, right? So you're like, look, if they doing what's right and everything's cool, and we try to fight them, we're going to get destroyed. And everybody going to know that we got destroyed. It's going to be highly publicized that we got our butt kicked by these people. The whole world is going to know it a whole world over. Right? Just like how We know about how the Most High God destroyed Egypt. Moses parted the Red Sea. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. All that stuff. We know these things, right? Everybody talks about it. Whether you believe it, like it, understand it or not, it's talked about. It's famous, right? So, he says, back over to Maccabees. So, where am I at? Boom. And it says, so then, verse 17. So, Maccabees chapter 2, verse 17. And it says, and then answered the king officers and said to Matthias on this wise, thou art ruler and a honorable and great man, and a great man in the city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. So you're like, look, hey, so these Greek officers and that's coaching our people to make, unclean sacrifices in the temple to Zeus, right? So you see Mattathias, which was a high priest, very respectable, known man in the community, right? Everybody know Mattathias, he the man, right? And everybody looks up to him. He got nice, strong sons, right? That people can look up to and aspire to be, right? And he says this to our dear brother Mattathias. He says, and then, boom, 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 boom. All right, then it says, then answered the king, so now therefore come thou first. So then he said, right, so then he said this to our brother Mattathias. It says, then Mattathias, I don't know why I keep losing my spot, but now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen has done. Yeah, in the man of Judah also, and such as remain in Jerusalem. So thou and thy house will be the be number of the king's friend, right? So you're like, hey, you're a popular guy in the community. Everybody look up to you. Why don't you be like one of the first to make this sacrifice? Then everybody else sees you do it. Then that's gonna make everybody else be like, all right, that's cool. I'll do it. Mattathias did it. His sons did it, and these is righteous men of the Lord. So hey, what's the harm, right? I mean, everybody's doing it, right? And that's how our people end up getting tricked, right? With these bullcrap religions that we follow, right? We see so-called holy men do certain things, right? And they're like, well, hey, I can do it. I mean, he doing it, right? And or we being through these religion institutions, right? I.e. Christianity. And like I said, we see a lot of jacked up stuff, right? And then instead of excommunicating ourselves from that, we say, well, hey, if they got away with it, maybe I can get away with it. Like, why don't I try it? Pastor going around sleeping with everybody's wives and everybody in the church. I mean, what's the harm in that? I mean, why can't I go have 11 baby mamas, right? Why not? So, what happened with this? So it says, and now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done. Yeah, and the men of Judea also, and such as the remnant of Jerusalem. So thou and thy house be numbered of the king's friend. He's like, look, if you do this, you're gonna be, counted as the king's friend, right? You're gonna be, very prestigious, and right? The king is going to look out for you, right? So a lot of our so-called leaders in our community, they would have took the bag. They would have took the check, right? A lot of our people take the check. A lot of people was mad at Snoop Dogg, last year. When he took the check, he was performing at, number 47 thing, right? So, even though Snoop Dogg is not a black leader, he's an entertainer. But the point that I'm making is, when he performed, a lot of our people got upset at it, right? And where we at? Then it says so it says, so shall thou and thy sons be numbered of the king's friend. So, and that's what Snoop and a lot of other so-called black celebrities did. They wanted to be counted as the king's friend, right? That's what a lot of our, people, our leaders do. When they, pucker up to the government and try to, throw their own people under the bus, they just trying to be the king's friend, right? So dude was like, hey, Mattathias, you can be the king's friend, right? Isn't that cool? Don't you want to be the king's friend, right? Everybody want to be the king's friend, right? And thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. Like, look, you're going to get a whole bunch of dough, right? You're going to get, not only you're going to be the king's friend, you're going to be well off, we're going to pay you, right? You know what I'm saying? We're going to keep you nice, right? So we take care of we take care of our own over here, right? You cool, right? Then it says, then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice. What did our big, powerful, big brothers say? What did Mattathias say, right? What did this great black man from the tribe of Levi, who today will be a Haitian, right? A powerful Haitian man today. What did this man say? Then answered Mattathias and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments. He like, look, all these other nations, that y'all done conquered and all that stuff, they might got down with the program, right? You know what I'm saying? They might, they might be some bitch ass niggas, right? Right? That's how they get down. They some bitch ass niggas, right? But he said this, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in a covenant of our fathers. He like, look, them niggas that y'all got to sacrifice and follow y'all bullshit, they some bitch ass niggas. But me and my peoples, we ain't rolling with that. You know what I'm saying? We're going to stick to what the Most High God gave us to our fathers, right? We're going to keep to the laws of our God, right? And what he said? God forbid that we should forsake the law, forsake the law and the ordinance. We will not hearken to the king's words. What did he say? We will not hearken to the king's words. Right? We got to have that zeal, right? That these brothers had. They said we would not hearken to the king's words. We ain't doing that stuff. We ain't going, right? We ain't rolling like that. That's not how we go, right? You know what I'm saying? You got to have that zeal that these brothers had. These mighty brothers had to go against the mighty Greek army and say, no, we ain't doing that, right? What happened? Then it says, we would not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, neither go right hand or left. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all, right? So now our dear brother Mattathias is giving this powerful speech, right? Even getting me hyped up right now just reading it, right? And just seeing the zeal and you know, and the steadfastness he had for the Most High, that how he's not going to be moved, right? How he raised his sons to have that same zeal. These were warriors we talking about. This is our people, right? You know, this is why we call this Black History BC, right? We're getting to understand of the mindset of our people, how they got down, right? And we can pull from this, right? We can pull courage from understanding these people and how they roll and the zeal they have for the Most High God. And ask yourself a question. Do I believe in God like these brothers believe in God? Right? You gotta ask yourself a question. So now when he left speaking these words, so he's got us speaking all this cold stuff, you know, getting us all hyped up. Like, yeah, forget them Greeks over there, right? Them little funky, stinky, smelling like cheese. What they like to eat over there? They got gyros over there. I mean, I mess with the gyros. I ain't gonna front. You know, the gyros is decent. You know what I'm saying? I mess with the Greek salad. It's straight. You know what I'm saying? The Caesar salad. But forget them people over there, right? You know what I'm saying? Right? I do like the gyro though. But forget them people over there, right? You know what I'm saying? So they said, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar which at Maccabean, according to the king's commandment. So here comes this Uncle Tom as this little sensitive, just, you know, Negro, right? This guy, right? So he like, well, here I come. I think I got some pork to put on the altar. You know, I can sacrifice. You know, I'll do what the king say, right? And this is why I love my brother Mattathias, right? You know, and this is why he's one of my heroes. You know, outside of, you know, of course, the most, you know, the Mashiach Yahweh Shai Christ. Then, you know, you got David. Then who else? You know, David. You know, Elijah was the man. Right? Daniel, right? You know, I mess with the prophets. You know, of course, one of my favorite prophets is Ezra, right? So, what happened here? What are our dear brother Matthias just got done giving a speech of a lifetime, right? This stuff should let you know, like, hey, yeah, you know, forget them people, man. We ain't doing none of that, right? You know what I'm saying? You just got done. We all saw that movie, Independence Day, right? And you remember the president, when they went to go fight the aliens, that was a very inspiring speech, right? Just one of those, right? But what happened? Now when he left speaking these words, there came out of the Jews in the sight of to sacrifice on the altar which was admitted according to the king's commandment. Which thing when Matthias saw. So when Matthias saw this, what did he do? He was inflamed with zeal. So he got angry. You know, if there's a word that's, you know, higher than angry, he got that, right? He was inflamed with zeal and reins trembled. Right? So he was so upset that he was shaking, right? Have you ever been so mad and so angry that you just be shaking, right? You just like, shaking, right? And you know, you're shaking, cause I mean, I know, cause I've been mad. I've been that mad before, right? And you're shaking cause you're trying to contain yourself from from doing what your mind is telling you what to do, what your emotions is telling you what to do. So you're trying to contain yourself, right? So that's what he's doing. He's shaking. He's so angry that he's shaking, that he's trying to, he's shaking. Then it says, which then Mattathias saw he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to slew his anger. So he couldn't even, he was so mad, he couldn't even calm himself down. Like, it wasn't, he tried all the, let me count to 10, 1. Let me count backwards from 10, 10, 9, 8, 7. Let me take the deep breaths, right? Let me take 3 deep breaths real quick. Cause like snipers in the military, they say before, to relax themselves, they take like 3 deep breaths. He tried all that stuff, right? But what did it say? Neither could he forbear to slew his anger according to judgment. So he was so angry because he's thinking about the laws of God. He's thinking about what God told us to do as a people. He's thinking about the contract, the blood oath that we made with the Most High God, right? So it's infuriating him because he understands the ramifications of breaking this contract. So it says, therefore he ran and slew the man upon the altar. He unalived that man right then and there, right upon the altar, right? He slumped him right there, left them slumped, linked them, right? Linked them to the left a little bit. That's what he did, right? He says, neither could he forbear to slew his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar, right? So he killed that man, unalived him, right then and there. Because he had the zeal. He was a zealot, right? No pun intended, but actually a pun intended, right? He was a zealot, right? He knew the covenant of the zealot, right? He slew that man. And it says, also the king commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice. So not only did he kill the guy that decided to, be the Uncle Tom and say, all right, yeah, I'll do that stuff. All right, I'll do it. Man, I ain't scared. I'll put a pig on the altar, on the Most High altar. You got to be out your mind. This is very. I'm being real cool. I'm trying to keep a little, put a little humor with it, right? But you gotta be out your mind to put pork on the Most High altar and sacrifice it, right? Gotta be out your mind. But what happens? Because I know I used to go to church. We go to church. You have those little occasions, they have the little dinners and stuff like that. Somebody done cook a nice little ham and stuff like that. They got ham and they got, crab salad and all this other stuff, right? And then everybody get their plate. They go sit down. Then here come pastor, with high blood pressure and diabetes and gout. Here he come walking up. And they pray over the food. And they ask the Lord to bless the pork and the crab salad and the stuff, right? That is crazy. That is how they say, that is diabolical, right? That is crazy. To ask the Most High to bless a food that he clearly, distinctively told you not to eat. That he clearly, distinctively told you he will kill you for eating it. That he will unalive you for eating it. If you don't believe me, we can read it. Right? That's crazy. Right? Very crazy. Hold on real quick. Let's get it real quick. Boom. We can read it. Isaiah 66 in verse 17. Let's get it real quick, right? Because I just said something. Because a lot of people's like, well, I love my pork, I love my shrimp and crab and seafood basket stuff that I be getting. You know, I was watching this some little, I don't know, was it on Facebook or whatever? I think it was on Facebook. Some guy, and Lord bless that woman of his that threw that stuff out. So he had like 4 buckets of chitlins, so he say, and she threw that stuff out. You know, thank God, and God bless her for doing that, right? And this man was crying, actually, literally a grown ass man. This man looked like he had to been like close to 40, and he crying over these chitlins, right? But the Most High said this: they that sanctify themselves, right? So you think that's all cool, you know, you like, I can eat this pork, I can eat this, I can eat these crabs, these shrimps, these lobsters, this catfish, you know. They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the garden. So just like you go to the church and that diabetic, gout-ridden pastor come and pray over your food that has pork and perhaps, cause I've been to church functions. I was in church for like 3/4 of my life. I tell people that all the time. Crab salad, right? And he prays over it. And everybody say amen. And they start eating that stuff. Do you really truly think the Most High blessed that food? Do you really truly think the Most High is with all that? When he says this: they that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the garden behind one tree in the midst, eating swine flesh. And so, for those that don't understand Old English, swine is pig, right? Porky the pig. For our Spanish brothers and sisters, el porco, right? No, I didn't say it right. Prostada, how do you say it in Spanish? Prostada, I don't know. No, it's something else. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Porco. I think porco is fat. I don't know. Somebody help me out. But it says eating swine's flesh, an abomination in the mouse. So the Most High God made equivalent pork to eating mouse. You know, you might as well go to Japan. Don't they be eating like rats and stuff like that? Go to China and stuff like that. They be eating rats, right? You might as well go ahead and get you a fried rice rat. You know what I'm saying? Rice fried rat. I don't know how we go. Shrimp fried rice, so it got to be rat fried rice, right? You might as well go ahead and get it, right? Because it says, they that sanctify themselves, purify themselves in the garden behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh, an abomination, meaning all the unclean foods that our people like to eat. And the mouse shall be consumed together, said the Lord. What did he say? Shall be consumed together, said the Lord. Right? That's what happens. So back over here. And it says, hold on. So it says, compelled the man to do sacrifice, he killed at the time at the altar, and the altar he pulled down. So, you know, he killed the man. So after the guy went up there to try to act like he, you know, trying to make that sacrifice, Mattathias unalived him right then and there and burnt the house down, for lack of better terms, because it says he destroyed the altar, right? Then it says, Thus he dwelt zealously for the law of a God. And that's what we have to be. We have to be zealous for the law, right? That's why we take the covenant of the zealot, right? Zealous for the law. And maintain the covenant, let him follow me. He says, and let me read it right. Boom, boom, boom. It says, that's what the, dang, I don't, okay, let me start right. It says, that's what he zealously for the law of God, like as Phineas did unto Zebri and the son of Solomon. And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, so he went through the whole city, like after he did what he did, you know, he looked at his guys like, hey, I'm on a run, G. Like, then he says, and Mattathias cried through the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So you're like, look, whoever want to get down with the get down, follow me, right? So a lot of our brothers and sisters followed after Mattathias, right? It says, follow me. Then it says, so let's jump down to 31. It says, now, let's jump down to verse 31. It says, now when it was told the king's servants and the host of Jerusalem and in the city of David that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into the secret place in the wilderness, they pursued after them, a great number having overtake them. They camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day. So, you know, so the people that didn't get down with the program, you know, we end up splitting off. Like, all right, we ain't down with that. We're gonna fight these people, right? So then they made war with our brothers on a Sabbath day. So when they gave them the battle with all speed, howbeit they answered not them, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stopped the place where they lay hid, but said, let us die in our innocency. Heaven and earth shall testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. Right? Hold on real quick. So like it. Okay. Yeah, Salakia. So, hey, where are we at? Boom. Boom, boom, boom. All right, then, yeah, so verse 31 is read one more time. Then it says that, now when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem, in the city of David, that certain men had broken the king's commandment, were down into the secret places in the wilderness. They pursued after them a great number, and having overtake them, they camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day. And they said unto them, let which ye have done hereto sacrifice come forth, and according to the commandment of the king. Hold on. Yeah, okay, never mind. Yeah, okay, let me read this part. Boom. But they said, we will not come forth, neither will we do the king's commandment to profane the Sabbath day. Then they gave the battle with speed, howbeit they answered them, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stop at the places where they laid hid. But let us die in our innocency. Heaven and earth shall testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. So now, these brothers, right? They was so it's a thing of being too holy, right? It's a thing. How people say, "Oh, this person think they're this super holy. They're gonna be sitting up there with God," right? It's a thing about being too holy. It's cool to be zealot. Be zealous for the law, because we're zealous, right? But these people were so zealous and so holy, when the Greeks came to attack them on a Sabbath, they didn't fight back. They took it as a badge of honor to die on the Sabbath. We don't do that, right? Like what's that movie, The Red Tails? We fight, right? So, and that was the mistake that our brothers made. They call themselves trying to be holy, but everything it happens for a reason. Because our brother Mattathias, they saw that, and they had to revenge these brothers and sisters that perished, right? They got unalived by the hands of the Greeks. They got slaughtered because they didn't fight back, right? And for that reason of not fighting back, they thought it was better to keep the law of the Sabbath, and they thought, well, shoot, fighting, that would be breaking the Sabbath. But we dealing with an enemy here, right? We dealing with a ruthless, godless enemy, right? They don't give a hoop nanny about your beliefs and what you think and all that, right? So, and sadly, they had to get unalive to understand that, right? So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they slew them with their wives and children and their cattle, to the number of 1,000 people. So they killed about 1,000 of our people, men, women, and children, right? All because we wanted to be holier than thou. We wanted to, they're attacking us on the Sabbath, so maybe we shouldn't fight. But nah, that's why we needed the brothers of the Maccabees. That's why the Most High, raised these good brothers up, because we have a unconventional enemy that don't give a hoop nanny about nothing, right? And it says, now when Mattathias and his friends understood thereof, they mourned for them a right sore. One of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done, and fight not for our lives in the laws against the heathen, they would now quickly root us out of the earth, right? So our people like, man, well, shoot, we can't go out like they just went out. They was, I understand that we separated ourselves, so we wanted to keep the law, but I mean, shoot, we ain't gonna, it ain't gonna be no good. What I'm saying? If we end up getting, they unalive us for it, So just we're gonna fight on the Sabbath, right? We ain't gonna be like them. We ain't gonna make that same mistake. We're gonna fight. We're gonna hold it down. We're gonna thump. We're gonna rumble in this hole, right? Like 3-6 Mafia. Romans 9:29, real quick, right? And it says this. It says, for as Elias said before, except the Lord of the Sabbath had left us a seed, we have been as Sodom and made like made like unto Gomorrah, right? So that's why we have to fight, because our ancestors, the Maccabees brothers, they understood if we did not fight, we will be destroyed and wiped off the map, just like Sodom and Gomorrah was wiped off the map, like we read over here. It says, and as Elias said before us, except the Lord of the Sabbath had left us a seed, we have been as Sodom and been made like Gomorrah. Right? So we understood that, and we didn't want to be destroyed, right? So we understood that we got to fight when these people come and get us. We can't be so holier than thou that, okay, well, we don't want to fight on this day, even though they're attacking us, so let's just lay down and take that. No, we ain't rolling like that, right? We ain't getting down with the whole little thing, right? So let's keep going. So it says, at the time, therefore they declared, saying, whosoever shall come and make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against him. Neither will we die. Neither will we die all, as our brethren that were murdered in the secret place. Then came there unto him a company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them, and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled into the heathen for succor. So, like I said, so once these brothers linked up with some other like-minded people, they develop an army, and then they start cleansing the land, for the lack of better terms, right? And if you're familiar with Moses, when we got on. When Moses came down with the 10 commandments and all that, well, with the commandments, more than 10, of course. And he saw what was going on, and he asked the people, like, who's on the side of the Lord? If you're on the side of the Lord, right? Then it was the Levites that stepped up. And the Levites, when they stepped up, they had no business. And they had to slay some of their brothers that was worshiping that calf that that they made in the wilderness while Moses was up there, right? So same thing. It says, and the wicked men with their wrath, and the rest of them fled fled to the heathens for succor. So, like I said, so Mattathias and them was going after the wicked the Israelites that was practicing Greek customs, that was propagating the lifestyle of the Greeks, right? So they were unaliving those people, right? Because that's how zealous they was. Not only did they want to get rid of the Greeks, they want to get rid of the Israelites that was assimilated into the Greeks. And it did so. Then it says, then Mattathias and his friends went around about and pulled down the altars, and what the children soever they found within the coast of Israel uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly, right? Valiantly, should I say? So, like I said, so they was finding people, circumcising them, bringing them back to the law, right? And trying to cleanse the land, right? And get all that heathenistic customs that our people were doing, and pushing that out, right? Fighting against it. And that's what we got to do in today's society. Like the propagation that comes against our community and the stuff that they propagate, we have to fight against it, because so many of our people get, sucked into a certain type of lifestyle that is being propagated through media, TV, music, or whatever, right? And the ones that know, we gotta fight against it, right? So it says, they pursued also after a proud man, and the work prospered in their hands. So, they was, taking down, the elites of our people that was, the Uncle Toms and that accepted the bag and took the bag from the Greeks, right? So they was taking them down. And it says, so they recovered the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and out of the hands of the kings. Neither suffered they the sinners to triumph. So like I said, so the Most High was with them, So all the stuff that they was doing, they was, circumcising the people, bringing them back to the customs of the Lord. They stole our word, holy book back, our scriptures. They took it back from them. And then it says, boom, boom, boom. It says, boom, boom. Then it says, so, let me read it again. So it says, so they recovered the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and out of the hands of the kings. Neither suffered they the sinners to triumph. Now when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now have pride and rebuke, gotten strength in the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now therefore, my sons, be ye zealous for the law and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. Right. So our dear brother Mattathias is about to die. So he's telling his 5 sons, hey, remember everything I taught you. Remember the laws of God. Keep the laws of God. Be zealous for the laws of God, right? And he's telling his sons this. And as fathers, that's what we need to teach our kids about the law and how important it is for the law, right? And how we should stand on the law. How they say, stand on business, right? For the law. Like he's telling his sons to stand on business for the law. Now therefore, my sons, be ye zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. That's how we feel about this thing, right? Give our lives for the covenant of our fathers, right? That's how serious you gotta be. You should have something in your life that you're willing to die for, right? And if not, then what you living for? If you ain't got nothing that you willing to die for, then what you living for, right? And these brothers was willing to die for what's in this book, what the Most High gave us, right? The law, statutes, and commandments, our culture, our heritage, who we are as a people, right? And you should too. And it says, call to remembrance what acts your fathers did in their time, so ye shall receive great honor and everlasting name. So you're like, look, remember all the great things that your ancestors have done. Remember the battles of Joshua. Remember the battles of David, right? You know what I'm saying? Remember all the great things that our people have done, right? Then it says, so yeah, right? So now, right, alright, let's get to let's go to Second Maccabees, right? Second Maccabees chapter 7. And we gotta understand how our people was, right? You know, because again, you know, we had some Uncle Tom, some people that handed over our nation to the Greeks. Then now you got the Maccabees and their army trying to, you know, restore things and bring things back to how it was, right? So then you have some people that was, you know, rolling with Maccabees. You know, that was, you know, was down for the crown, standing 10 toes down. And one of my favorite stories of the Bible, right? These 7 brothers that this powerful sister had, right? And she trained them well. She taught them well. Just like we need to do with our kids, right? She taught them well, right? Just like Maccabees, just like Mattathias was taught his sons well, right? He taught them how to rule a nation, how to run a nation. That's why they was able to save us from the Greeks, right? So this lady taught her sons well. We're gonna probably not read everything, but we're gonna read enough. God dang it. To get a good picture of the spirit that we need to be in as a people, right? When it comes to keeping these laws, statutes, and commandments and doing what the Most High God told us to do, right? And understand, you know, the spirit that our people had for the Most High, and understanding, you know, the contract that we had and how important it is. And just like Mattathias told his sons to be willing to give your life for this thing, right? And I tell people all the time, when it comes to this Bible, I believe everything in this Bible from Genesis to Revelation. And I'm a zealot for this Bible. And I hope you understand when I say that. So it's right here. It started at 2 Maccabees chapter 7. It came to pass also that the 7 brethren with their mother were taken and compelled by the king against the law to taste swine flesh. So you have this mother and her 7 sons that are kidnapped, and they're taken, and they're trying to force them to eat pork, right? And, you know, because that's how they was getting down on us. They're trying to force us to eat this pork. Because, again, like we read in the book of Judah, they understood whenever we're not keeping the laws of God, they can overtake us. But whenever we are keeping the laws of God, they can't do nothing with us, right? So they're trying to force the people to go against the laws of God, right? And let's see what this strong sister did with her strong 7 sons that the Lord blessed her with, right? By the king, and it says, it came to pass that the 7 brethren with their mother were taken and compelled by the king against the law to taste swine flesh, and were tormented with scourges and whips. So they tortured these 7 brothers, right? Right? They tortured them to, you know, try to make them eat. Now, how many people, you know, you got a plate of bacon, right? And somebody say, I'm gonna kill you. I got a gun, and if you don't eat this bacon, I'm gonna, you know, how many people will eat the bacon? I'm counting on almost everybody will eat the bacon. That's, you know, that's not in the truth, right? Because unless you got the spirit of these brothers and understand what's going on, it says, were tormented with scourge and whips. But one of them that spake first said thus, What dost thou ask and learn of us? So this is one of my favorite quotes in the Bible, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, whatever, right? So he said something very powerful, right? And we got to understand this thing. This man said this. What dost thou ask and learn of us? Like, what have you learned of us, right? You've been torturing us. You've been beating us. You've been doing all this horrendous things to us, right? So far, what have you learned, right? We are ready to die rather than to transgress the laws of our fathers, right? That's what a zealot is, right? We are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our fathers. That's what he told these people that was torturing them, right? This man is getting tortured to eat a BLT, right? A bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, right? And he says, no, I'd rather die than put that pork on my fork, right? That's what he told them. How many people would rather die than to put pork on their fork? A lot of people last month willingly put pork on their fork, eating a whole pot of chitlins and all that stuff, eating ham and whatnot, right? Probably this morning I had you some bacon, right? Pork bacon. So, but how many people is willing to die before they put pork on their fork? How serious is it for you, right, to keep the laws of God? It was very serious for these brothers. He said, What dost thou ask and learn of us? For we are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our fathers. Then the king, being enraged, commanded pans and cordons and made hot with being heated, and he commanded to cut off the tongue of him that spake first, and cut off the utmost parts of his body, and the rest of his brethren, and his mother was looking on. So check this out. Say like you're one of the 7 brothers, right? If you're a sister, you're probably the mother, right? So you see your brother or your son, and he's standing 10 toes down, standing on business. We standing on business. We standing on business, right? He's standing on business, right? So basically, they heated up some grease, right? They heated up the grease in a big giant pot, right? They heated up the grease. They cut the man's tongue off because they thought he was talking too much. That's very torturous. You cut the man's tongue off, throw him in a little hot pot of grease. He's not going to be able to scream. I mean, he can scream, but he ain't going to be able to make no noise because his tongue is cut off. Then not only did they cut his tongue off, it says it's cut the othermost parts of his body. So they probably cut off some other extremities of him, right? Lord knows, right? And they fried him, for the lack of better terms. They threw him in a hot boiling pot of grease, right? And the man died in front of his 6 other brothers and his mother, right? And his mother had to wash it. His 6 other brothers had to wash it, right? So you number 6, right? You next up. You the next brother, right? What you gonna do, right? You just watch your brother got his tongue cut off. He got beaten up, tortured, right? Got bacon thrown in his face. Got a pork chop smacked against his face, trying to make him eat it, but he didn't eat it. He got thrown in a big hot pot of grease and got fried to death. So what you gonna do? What you gonna do? What happened? And now when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire, and so to be so to be fried, and so to be fried in a pan. So that's what they did. So after they done chopped the man up, cut parts off his body, right? He's still alive because he a G, right? Then it says, now when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire, and to be fried in the pan. And as the vapors of the pan was for a good space dispersed, they exhorted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus. Hold on. That's what these powerful brothers did, right? They watched their brother get thrown into a big giant frying pan and got fried, right? These Greeks, you know what I'm saying? They're very vicious, right? They're very mean people, right? So they watched their brother get, chopped and strewed and thrown into a frying pan. That's what they watched. And what they say to themselves. What happened, right? And it says, and they exalted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus. So as they see their brother dying, they pumping each other up like, yo, we gonna die like men, right? Forget what they heard. You know what I'm saying? We ain't going out like no punks, right? Our brother died like a man, we gonna die like a man. That's what the other brothers did, right? So you gotta ask yourself a question. What would you do? Are you gonna die like a man, or are you gonna be a little biatch, right? So what happened? The Lord God look upon us, and in truth have comfort us. And Moses in his song was witness to their faces, declared, saying, and he shall comfort his servants, right? So they knew the law. They understood that the Most High God is with his people, right? Whether through death or through life, he's with us, right? Because they understood, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you can destroy this body, but not the soul, right? Because what did Christ say? Like, don't fear the man that can destroy your body, but you should have fear of the one that can destroy your soul, right? Because this body comes and goes, right? But your spirit, right? The Most High controls that spirit. And if he's decide to blot you out, I mean, you gone, right? Ain't no more coming back, right? There's no sequel, none of that. So it says, so when the first was dead after his manner, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off his skin of his head, and with the hair, they asked him, wilt thou eat? So they skinned this man's scalp, you know what I'm saying? They was acting like they was, rolling with our Native American brothers, right? They done skinned the man's scalp. They skinned him. Took his flesh off his head, right? What happened? It says, and when they had pulled off the hair of his head with the hair, they asked him, wilt thou eat? Therefore thou shalt be punished throughout every member of thy body. But he answered in his own language. What did he say in his own language? He said, la'ah, right? La'ah, no. That's what he said. No. Therefore he answered and received the next torment in order as the former did. So like I said, they chopped and mangled him up too, right? And threw him in a frying pan. And when he was at the last gasp, he said, "Thou art thou like a furry let me read it right. And it says, and when he was at the last gasp, he said, "Thou like a fairy taking us out of this present life, but the King of the world shall raise us up, who gave us, who died for our for his laws until to everlasting life." Right. So they understood that dying for the Most High God is an honor, and the Most High God is not going to forget that, right? And He's going to raise them up to everlasting life. What did it say? Just read it one more time. And when he was at the last gasp, he said, "Thou like a fairy taking us out of his presence, out of this present life, but the King of the world shall raise us up, who have died for us, who had died for us, his laws unto everlasting." So they like, look, we died for these laws, right? And we got the Most High God who controls everything, and He can raise us up from, and they understood the blessing. They understood the honor in dying for the Most High, right? Because a lot of us would have ate the pork. We would have did all that. We would have saved our own lives. Like, hey, it's just a piece of bacon. Why not, right? Not understanding that the Most High God will kill you. We just read it in Isaiah, right? Isaiah 66. We read it. Right, hold on real quick. Settle out here. So like, alright, we back. Right? We back. Oh yeah. Back to the #1 Facebook rated show among females that is getting their hair done at the salon and have to sit there for more than 3 hours. Right? We're back. You know what I'm saying? So where was it? Boom. So boom, boom, boom. And it says, and when he was, okay, I read that, and it says, after him was the third made a mocking stock, and when he was required, he put out his tongue, and that right soon holding forth his hand manfully. So now the third, like, look, I don't care what you. Matter of fact, I'm gonna put my tongue out for you. You want to cut my tongue out? Boom, here's my tongue right here. Boom, cut it out. So he's like, look, you hold his tongue out for him to cut, right? And it says, and said courageously, these I have from heaven, and for his laws I despised them. He like, look, the Most High God gave me this tongue, right? I got it from heaven. But for the laws of God, I will lose this tongue, right? How many people will say that? How many people will do that, right? You know, the tongue is very sensitive, right? You know, you be talking, sometimes you might accidentally bite your tongue, right? You know, you be eating hot soup, you might burn your tongue, right? It's very sensitive. This man stuck his tongue out willingly, told him, hey, cut my tongue out if that's what you're going to do. But I'm not eating no bacon, no pork on my fork, right? And it said courageously, these I have from heaven, and for his laws I despise them, and from him I hope to receive them again. Because again, we know about regeneration. We know the blessings of the Most High God. And much that the king and they that were with him marveled at the young man's courage, for that they had nothing regarding for he had nothing regarding pains. Now when his man was dead also, they torment and mangled the fourth in like manner. So, you know, like I said, we ain't gonna read the whole thing. The point is, they killed all 7 of her sons. They even killed our dear sister also. All because they did not want to eat pork, right? So that was what was going on during this time, right? And, you know, so our people were, you know, getting oppressed by the Greeks. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on with the Greeks. They was, you know, passing all these different laws and stuff like that, certain things we couldn't do. And then the ones that was still trying to keep the customs, you know, as we can read, you know, they was getting oppressed and unalive, you know, at a high rate. So lucky we had the Maccabean brothers to fight for these people, right? Let's go back to First Maccabees chapter 4 real quick. First Maccabees chapter 4 in verse 29, I think. Yeah, verse 29, right? So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna get right to it. So it says, so they came unto Idumea and pitched their tents in Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. So you know, Idumea is south of Judah, the land of Judah, which is Idumea is a Latin Greek way of saying the land of Edom, which is where the so-called Caucasian people come from, right? Come from the land of Edom. And in the Greek or Latin, it's called Idumea, right? So, you know, we end up making a little stronghold in Idumea. And of course, at this time, you know, as a bulk, as a whole, the Edomites are not in the land of Idumea, you know, because now they're calling themselves Greeks and Romans and stuff, right? So, you know, but we did have a sprinkle of the Idumea people living down there, right? Because history will tell you, because I gotta be honest, you know, history will tell you about 20,000 Edomites or so-called Caucasians, you know, fought with us against the Greeks and the Romans, right? So yeah, that happened. Well, against the Greeks, I believe. I don't know if they fought against the Romans with us, but I know against the Greeks, like about 20,000. So not all the Edomites were, you know, up in Europe or the Caucasus Mountains and stuff. You know, we still had a few down there. And when I and when he saw the mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who did quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of the strangers unto the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, his armor bearer. So he's like, look, he praying to God, like, look, the same way you saved David, and our ancestors of old, we need you, Lord. We need your help, right? Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. So he's praying for their downfall. He's praying for a victory when this army come upon them, that they'll be able to defeat them, right? Cast down with the sword of them that love thee, and cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise ye with thanksgiving. So he's like, look, use us to destroy these people, destroy these Greeks that's coming against us and coming against our land and destroying it, right? And it says, so they joined battle, and they were slain the host of the Lycians, the Lycians, or how you say it, the Lycians, about 5,000 men, even before them were slain. Now when the Lycians saw his army put to flight, in the manliness of Judas soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, they went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again Judea, and said, Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfort. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. So they defeated these people, right? They got them all discombobulated. They're retreating. They're going to try to man up and get some other people to try to join with them. So now our dear brother Judas, he realized, like, hey, well, shoot, we got some time to kill, we got them on a run. Let's go sanctify the temple. Now we got the temple back. We finally defeated these people. We was able to win. We got the temple. So now that we got the temple, let's go sanctify it, right? That's what's going on. So it says, boom, boom, boom. Then it says, upon this all the hosts assembled themselves together and went into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolated, and the altar profaned, and the gates burnt up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in the forest, or in one mountains, the priest's chambers pulled down. So they come, they go back to the temple, right? They see that it's, destroyed, it's desolate. It looked like it haven't been used in decades, because you got, a foliage, if I'm saying that right, growing all everywhere. You got trees and, everything just covering everything, vines, and everything's, just messed up, right? Then you got, of course, they've been sacrificing pork and everything all up in there, right? So it's defiled, right? So when they come back, they're very distraught and upset at the condition of the temple, because they haven't been able to go there and sacrifice for, years, right? Because, although we reading this stuff, you got to understand, it's a lot of time in between, what's going on, right? So not everything is happening day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. A lot of the stuff got some time and months and years in between, right? So, then it says, then we have boom, 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 and it says, hold on. It says, and they, verse 39. And they rent their clothes and made a great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew alarm with the trumpets and cried towards the heaven. So, they were, very distraught at the conditions, of the temple when they got there and saw how destroyed it was, and it's a lot of work they got to do. So, they, showed their displeasement, and they sent their little supplications to the Most High, Then it says, when Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the forest until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So, they're still trying to fight, So he had sent a few people out to handle the battle while they try to, get the sanctuary together, right? We got to get the sanctuary together. Let's get Micah real quick. I think I want Micah, right? Let's get Micah. Really quickie. I think I want. Matter of fact. Look at Malachi 2. So just go back over here real quick. It says, and they fell down upon their faces, and they blew an alarm with a trumpet and cried towards the heaven. And Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. And he chose priests of a blameless conversation, as had pleasure in okay, hold on. It says, so he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, right? So you got these priests that that understood the law, and they had zeal for keeping the law, and that's what you want, as a so-called spiritual leader, religious leader, someone you follow. You want to make sure that they have zeal for the law and they keep the law, because our dear brother Malachi tells us this in Malachi chapter 2 verse 7. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth. So the priest's lips should seek knowledge. You should always be in learning mode, and then the people should be able to come to you and understand the law from you and learn the ways of God from you. Because it says, for the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth, for the messenger of the Lord, for he is the messenger of the Lord. So the people should be able to come to you and understand this book, right? And understand the laws of God, right? Because the priest's lips should keep knowledge, right? That's why it says over here, so he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, right? Because you have to have pleasure in the law, that way you can do the law and keep it, right? That's part of the reason why the Most High ended up punishing us. You can read it in Deuteronomy, because it says, because you kept my law without gladness and joyness of the heart, therefore you have to serve your enemies for everything. Because we were just doing the law and doing it because it was we felt like a chore, and we made it, you know, made it a burden. So the Most High said, okay, I'll show you what a burden is. You're gonna have to, you know, be subjugated to these nations throughout these years, right? Malachi 4:4. Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Hebrew for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments, right? So that's why it's important to have man of the Lord to understand the commandments of God, right? So that's why Judas, picked these people. It says, and he chose priests of blameless conversation as a pleasure in the law, and as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary, bear out of the defiled stones into the unclean place. Right? So they took these stones that the heathens had, defiled by sacrificing unclean foods, in our sanctuary, and they took those stones. Cause you gotta understand, like, going back to how the church would pray with pork and all that stuff, which is crazy. You gotta understand how certain things, defile the temple and defile you, right? So they took these defiled things outside, of the holy place, to cleanse it. And that's the thing too. Spiritually speaking, our body is the temple, and we have to cleanse our body and take and remove all these unclean things and take it out of the holy place, which is our body, on the spiritual side. And it says, and it says, boom, boom, boom. Who cleansed the sanctuary, and bear out the defiled stones into the unclean place. And when they hold on, read it. It says, and when as they constitute what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they brought it. They thought it was best to pull it down, lest it should be approached to them, because the heathen had defiled it, where before they pulled it down. So, so they destroyed everything. So they're like, look, let's just build a whole new altar, because they've been putting pork and who knows what they've been doing on this thing, right? So they tore it all down. It says, and lay up the stones of the mountains of the temple in a convenient place, until there should be a prophet to show them what should be done with them. So they took the stones away, right? And it says, then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hollowed the courts. And they made also new holy vessels unto the temple. They brought candlesticks in the altar, and the burnt offerings, the incense, and the table. So they just recreated everything of the temple and made it new, right? Because they had to throw away everything else, because it was violated through the uncleanliness of the with the unclean sacrifices that was making in there. So then let's jump down to 52. It says, and now on the 5th and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Cashew, in the 148th year, they arose bedtimes in the morning. So in the month of Cashew, which is the month we in now, right? Because we're celebrating the Feast of Dedication, known as Hanukkah. Then it says, and offer sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar and burnt offerings which they had made, and look at what time and what day the heathen had performed it, and even that it dedicated with a song and chitrons and harps and cymbals. Right? So they was looking at the date, like, all right, what day we doing this? So they trying to figure out the day how we gonna celebrate this thing. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising God of heaven, who had given them success. So they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered a burnt offering with gladness and sacrifice and deliverance and praise. So they kept the feast 8 days, right? And that's what we're getting ready to do this coming Friday, going into Saturday. We're going to keep it for 8 days, just like our ancestors, our brothers did. And it says, and offer burnt offerings and gladness and sacrifice and deliverance and praise. They decked it also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields. And the shields is these, right? Because a lot of people will be thinking this is whatever. We ain't gonna get into it right now. That's the shield. You understand? Then it says, decorated with shields in the gates of the chamber, they renewed and damaged the door upon them. Thus were there great gladness among the people, for the reproach of the heathen was away. So we got our victory over the Greeks. We were able to rededicate our temple and build it back up, and and give sacrifice again, right? And it says, moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel attained that day that day of dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year. So so they like, look, we're gonna do this every year around this same time. So this is why we still keep it to this day, right? Even Christ himself was keeping it, right? And it says, moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel attained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year, by the space of 8 days, from the 5 and the 20th day of the month of Cashew, with myrrh and gladness, right? So we keep it 8 days, right? And it's not like what the little curly haired people tell you with the little saucers sitting on top of their head, and they tell you like, oh yeah, it was a miracle. We only had enough oil for 2 minutes. I don't know if they say 2 minutes. I'm just throwing 2 minutes in there, right? We only had enough oil for 30 seconds, and then the Most High, the Lord blessed us, and the oil lasted for 8 days. So now we celebrate Hanukkah. We never read that. We didn't read anything like that in there, right? We read that our brothers got down and fought these Greeks and destroyed these Greeks, and got our temple back and took our holy scriptures back. And then they said, hey, we need to commemorate this day. Commemorate this day and make it an 8-day celebration. That's what we did, right? So it wasn't how they tell us in their belief system that we didn't read anything about a miracle. We just read about us kicking their butt. That's it, right? And it says, at the time they also built up Mount Zion with a high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down. They had done as they unless the Gentiles should come tread it down as they had done before. So so we built up the city, put some security and all that stuff into place, right? And it says, and they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Beersheba to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea, right? So there we have it, right? Like I said, we had kind of skipped through it because a lot of amazing battles, a lot of stuff that went on with the Maccabeans, and a lot of battles and stuff that that they fought against the Greeks, and won, right? Of course we're gonna get into it a little deeper as we get closer to the holiday and through the holiday. I just want to touch on a few things and give you an overview of the holiday and how we became to celebrate it and what was going on, right? Because we have to fight for it, right? Like a lot of our holidays have a very significant reason behind them, and this comes from us defeating the Greeks and taking our temple back and our scriptures back, and then creating this holiday to celebrate that achievement, right? So hopefully that was edifying. We got a little understanding of how our people was rolling during this Maccabees era, this Black History BC, right? Get understanding our history from the BC time. So I'm gonna say shalom, peace. Until next time, we out. All praises to the Most High. We out.